Hello, I'm going to make a better explanation for the life cycle of a life. So, as you hopefully started to pick up on in the quantum holonomy theory video, a life is the geometry and the relationship between the oscillations from entropy to order that occur between two so-called bounces or collisions, etc. It's the big bounce that they were talking about in the video. So if we start over here with the birth/death point, and I say birth/death because they are one and the same, the transition from death to birth is simply a sort of crossing over from one side to another. We perceive, like, because of the filters that we currently have on our bodies, or on our consciousnesses based on our the existence of our bodies, we experience this as death and birth, but in a higher dimension. When our consciousness is in a higher dimension, we're not perceiving it that way. It's just going around a corner that we can't see. So as one person is dying, or as a person is dying, their consciousness comes back around the corner, and because we're not in the right dimension to be able to see it, it looks like they're gone, but they're just on the other side of the thing that we cannot see. So that's that. So these oscillations, there's the oscillation between order and unity towards the sort of center of this point here, and that's sort of collapse, inward, implosion, etc. Chaos and entropy are, and that's used to describe when there's very little distance between any two things that you're measuring. So that's when there's very little distance between these points or any two things. There is order when there is little distance between those. Chaos and entropy occur when there is a very large distance between any 2 points that you're measuring. So this and then, okay, so when in a life, so a life can be either between someone's literal birth and their death, or it can be, you can also measure, the 2 points you're measuring between don't actually matter. This could be the course of a single day, from the sun rising to the sun setting, or this could be a week. It doesn't matter how you are the one that defines what you're measuring between. So between any of those 2 points, you have the point of maximum polarity of that particular lifetime, whether it's the day, the week, the month, or your entire life. Now, of course, over the course of your entire life, you can't tell what the point of maximum polarity is and the point of minimum polarity until you have rounded the corner of death, or are about to, and then you can look back and see where those points were. But until, it's like Schrodinger's cat. You can't tell what those points are until you've decided to stop measuring. So let's just, for the sake of the argument, you have, we'll call this the course of a day. You have your point of maximum polarity. And that's when you look back and you had the most sort of chaos or entropy, the most distance between all of your particles. And so that can look like dissociation. That can look like that's how it often shows up for me is dissociation, like the most scattered. They say when you're scatterbrained, the most scattered that you are. And then you have the point of minimum polarity, usually quickly following the point of maximum polarity, because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So the point of minimum polarity is where you have the most order and unity and the least distance between all of your cells, or the point where you are the least, or the most focused, rather. And so-called mystical experiences happen when you oscillate further to one direction or the other than you have before. So again, you might have your sort of mystical experience. You might have one here and here for the course of your day. And the more, so if this is the course of your day, this point of maximum polarity is usually not, unless you've had a particularly insane day, you will have had days that were, that had greater, in which you had greater polarity. So if this is not a day anymore, but let's say the course of a month, that point of maximum polarity that for your month might actually be more like here for or that point of maximum polarity for your day might actually be more like here over the course of your month. So it's all relative. So over the course of your life, when you have a point of maximum polarity that is the greatest you have experienced so far, that's where you have these really terrifying experiences and these really awe-inspiring experiences. That's where you find mystical, tripping psychedelics. Both ends of the spectrum, chaos and order, have invoke those sorts of experiences from them. And quite often when we're coming up to a point of maximum or minimum polarity, that's where we feel a lot of fear and confusion and sort of a tearing apart of ourselves. So like, particularly with the point of maximum polarity, that's where we often feel the sense of loss and sacrifice and tearing apart, because the distance between our cells of consciousness, at least, is physically increasing. And so we feel a lot of panic and like, what is going on? And then when that kind of snaps back together is when you get that intense clarity and feel like you really understand what's going on. So one of the keys here is that you don't the points you're measuring between are the only places where the energy kind of collapses down to nothingness in this particular dimension. So when let's say this is a full human lifetime. Okay. This point of birth starts with a collapse that is so small, like from a point so small that it might as well not exist in our reality. It's, that Planck unit, etc., point of measurement. And similarly, death recollapses to that infinitely, or not infinitely, as the video was pointing out, according to this theory. But for the sake of our own perception, it might as well be, it's so small that we would never have hope of perceiving it, potentially even with equipment, but I digress. With our human senses, we cannot perceive how small the point is that things, the reality of that being collapse into. So throughout this human life, those points of energy, so you might consider it creative and destructive energy. We'll call chaos destruction and order creation. The points on either side of this plane will not touch until that point of death again. So that's what makes a human life special, is that you have these two, well, in this dimension, it looks like two energies. And let me just change the colors here. So let's say you have your feminine energy going on up here. And let's say we have your masculine energy going on up here. Between those 2 points of birth and death, those energies will never touch. They will always be grasping for each other. Let me see, let me get the mirror back in here. They will always be grasping for each other, but they will never quite be able to touch until that point of death in this particular, that we can perceive in these bodies. And that's what creates attraction to each other as well, is when you have two energies that are let's say the two energies that are well suited to create further life and continue this process, they will forever be trying to touch each other until death. And that's what love is, in my mind. So, yeah, I think that is probably about it for now.